6:42 a.m. 40 miles west of the Strait of Hormuz, the Pacific Fortuna was still moving at 14.8 knots, carrying nearly 1.95 million barrels of crude oil and 26 crewmen into the narrowest oil corridor on Earth. Then the sea exploded. A white column of water shot almost 230 feet into the air, less than 200 feet off the starboard side. The shockwave slammed into 332 meters of steel. Alarms screamed, lights flickered. Down in the engine room, one engineer hit the deck before he even understood what happened. No missile trail, no warning shot. Just one detonation in a shipping lane only 2 nautical miles wide. And the worst part? The tanker was still inside Iranian range. Mines below, fast boats closing, coastal missiles waiting in the cliffs. Before we break down how Iran turned Hormuz into a floating toll booth, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because this story is not about one explosion, it is about the price of fear. 5:58 a.m. West of the Strait of Hormuz, the captain of the Pacific Fortuna ordered engines ahead standard. The ship answered slowly. A 332-meter wall of steel began pushing southeast at 14.8 knots, carrying nearly 1.95 million barrels of crude oil and a crew of 26 into the most dangerous oil corridor on Earth. On paper, it was a routine transit. In reality, it was a 6-hour crawl through a corridor watched by radar, drones, patrol boats, and coastal missile batteries. The open water was still 88 nautical miles away. At this speed, that meant almost 6 hours before the tanker could breathe. 6 hours with the Iranian coastline to port. 6 hours inside range. 6 hours where a ship worth hundreds of millions of dollars had almost no way to defend itself. The Pacific Fortuna had no escort, no missile defense, no close-in weapons system, no armed security team capable of stopping a coastal missile or a mine beneath the keel. Her only protection was international law, a bridge radar, a radio, and the hope that nobody decided to turn geography into a weapon. At 6:11 a.m., her AIS transponder kept broadcasting. Name, position, speed, heading, cargo. Every few seconds, the tanker announced itself to anyone listening along the coast. That system was built to prevent collisions. Here, it did something else. It gave the watchers on Qeshm Island a moving target. By 6:24 a.m., the coast of Iran was visible from the bridge. Qeshm stretched across the northern horizon. Larak and Hormuz sat ahead. Abu Musa waited farther east. The traffic lane was only about 2 nautical miles wide. The tanker needed several kilometers to stop and nearly 4 kilometers to complete a turn. That meant one thing. If danger appeared close, the captain would not dodge it. He would meet it. 6:37 a.m. The radar stayed clean. The water did not. A lookout on the starboard bridge wing spotted a dark object sitting low in the outbound lane, roughly 430 meters ahead. Too steady to be floating trash. Too quiet to be harmless. The captain checked the chart. There was no room to turn. A hard move left could push 305,000 tons of ship and crude into oncoming traffic. A hard move right could drag her toward Iranian-controlled water. Slowing down would not save her either. At that mass, the Pacific Fortuna would keep moving for nearly 5 kilometers before she truly stopped. The object slipped past the hull at about 180 meters. Nothing happened. Then the sea behind them erupted. A secondary blast punched upward nearly 90 feet, about 900 meters off the stern. The shock rolled through the water and tapped the ship like a warning from underneath. Not a direct hit, not an accident anyone wanted to explain. Maybe a Baham 3 influence mine, maybe something older, maybe something placed exactly where it needed to be. The bridge went silent. Think about that. One explosion behind the ship and the entire voyage changed price. The crew started logging coordinates. Cameras came out. Athens wanted video. London would want paperwork. And under the keel, the real question was still moving with them. Because the next device might not explode behind the tanker. It might wait directly ahead. 7:08 a.m. East of Larak Island, the main blast hit. Not under the keel, not close enough to tear the tanker open, but close enough to make every person aboard understand how small a human body feels inside 332 meters of steel. The explosion erupted less than 65 meters off the starboard side. A wall of white water climbed nearly 70 meters into the air. The shockwave slammed into the hull and rolled through the ship from bow to stern. Bridge windows shook. Warning panels lit up. One gyro repeater failed for 6 seconds, then came back alive. Down in the engine room, the chief engineer reported pressure loss in an auxiliary cooling line. No flooding, no fire, no breach in the cargo tanks, but the message was clear. The Pacific Fortuna had been touched. At 7:11 a.m., the radar painted the next problem. Small contacts, fast contacts. 5 at first, then 9, then 13, all coming out from the Iranian coast at 44 to 53 knots, closing the distance faster than the tanker could even begin a turn. The first IRGC fast boat crossed the bow at 210 meters. The second ran down the port side at 35 meters, close enough for the crew to see helmets, cameras, and mounted weapons. A third boat dropped behind the stern, riding inside the tanker's wake like it owned the lane. The radio cracked open. Marshall Islands vessel, alter course. Proceed to Bandar Abbas. The captain answered with the only weapon he had, his voice. He stated that Pacific Fortuna was transiting under the right of passage and maintaining course and speed. Legally correct, tactically helpless. The boats circling her were not fishing craft. They were IRGC fast attack craft, the kind built for swarm pressure. Paycap-class missile boats, about 17 meters long, able to sprint past 50 knots, carrying Kausar anti-ship missiles. Behind them could come C-14 catamaran missile boats with C-704s or Hudong-class boats armed with Noor missiles. A Noor could reach beyond 150 kilometers. Its warhead weighed around 165 kilograms. The tanker's defense was a radio log and shaking hands. For almost 9 minutes, the boat stayed close. They filmed. They boxed her in. They forced every officer on the bridge to calculate distance, speed, and impact angle in silence. Then they peeled away toward the coast. No missile fired, no gun opened up. But after the blast, the message did not need translation. Iran had proved the lane could be controlled without sinking the ship. 7:41 a.m., the fast boats were gone. That did not make the Pacific Fortuna safer. It made the threat quieter. The tanker held 13.6 knots, slower than before the blast, but still moving. The captain did not want to push the engines too hard until the crew checked the auxiliary systems. He also knew the other truth. Every minute spent inside the strait was another minute under Iranian range. To starboard, the coast of Keshem Island filled the northern horizon. Long roads, low buildings, antenna masts, vehicles moving near the cliffs, and dark openings in the rock that did not look like homes, warehouses, or fishing sheds. They looked military. At 7:54 a.m., the second officer spotted fresh tire marks on a dirt track above the shoreline. Wide tracks, heavy tracks, the kind left by mobile launch vehicles that roll out, fire, and disappear before anyone can answer. That was the real problem. The IRGC boats had to move. The coast did not. A Noor anti-ship missile could launch from a concealed battery and fly low over the water at roughly Mach 0.9. In its final approach, it could drop to only 5 to 8 meters above the waves. That is lower than the bridge wing on the tanker. Low enough to hide inside radar clutter. Late enough that a commercial crew would have seconds, not minutes. Then came Cotter. Longer reach, heavier pressure. A range of roughly 220 to 280 kilometers, enough to cover the entire crossing from positions well inland. The launcher could fire, reverse, vanish, and the tanker would never see the truck that changed its fate. At 8:17 a.m., the name nobody on the bridge wanted to say entered the conversation. College Fars, an anti-ship ballistic missile built from the Fateh 110 family. It did not skim the sea like Noor. It climbed. Then it came down at Mach 3 to Mach 5, carrying a warhead close to 650 kilograms. For a warship, that is a crisis. For a loaded VLCC, it is a nightmare written in numbers. The boats had left, but the coastline had not, and every cliff ahead looked like it was waiting. 8:32 a.m. west of Abu Musa, the sky became part of the trap. A small aircraft appeared above the tanker, circling at roughly 5,100 feet. It was slow, steady, patient, likely a Mohajer reconnaissance drone. It did not dive. It did not fire. It watched. Position, speed, heading, damage status after the blast. Everything the Pacific Fortuna did was now data. AIS gave the coast one picture. Radar stations gave another. The fast boats had filmed the hull. Now the drone completed the chain from above. At 8:39 a.m., it made a second orbit. The bridge crew tracked it in silence. A lookout asked whether it could carry a warhead. Nobody answered quickly. Because in this waterway, cheap aircraft can create expensive decisions. Iran's Shahed 136 had already shown the logic of low-cost pressure. A long-range one-way drone, often estimated around $20,000 to $40,000, threatening targets worth millions. The math was brutal. A drone did not need to destroy a supertanker. It only needed insurers to believe one could. By 8:51 a.m., Athens had the incident report. 2 blasts, IRGC boats, coastal missile exposure, a drone overhead. In London, that report became a number. War risk coverage that once looked like background noise could now climb toward 2.6% of hull and cargo value. On this voyage, that meant several $1 million. Then came the rumor, a so-called safe passage fee, around $2.1 million. No official stamp, no public invoice, just a number small enough to tempt a ship owner, and large enough to prove the point. Iran did not have to close Hormuz. It only had to make fear cheaper to pay than to challenge. 9:28 a.m. The eastern mouth of the strait finally opened. The Iranian coastline began to fall behind the Pacific Fortuna, mile by mile. The radar picture cleared. The radio stayed quiet. The captain brought the tanker back up to 14.3 knots, careful, steady, and still watching every alarm panel on the bridge. No one celebrated, because this did not feel like escape. It felt like being released. The final report was sent at 9:43 a.m. No cargo tank rupture, no major flooding, no fire. 3 damaged auxiliary systems, 1 injured crewman with a fractured wrist, and nearly $190 million in crude oil still floating toward Fujairah. On paper, the transit succeeded. In reality, every number had changed. The blasts did not sink the ship. The fast boats did not board her. The Mohajer drone did not strike. The Noor, Qadr, and Khalij Fars missiles stayed in their launch zones. But the insurance market had already moved. So had the ship owners. A route that once looked routine now looked like a calculated risk with a military shadow behind it. At 10:02 a.m., the other side of the equation came into view. U.S. naval forces were still operating in the region. Mine countermeasure ships near Bahrain, Seahawk helicopters in the Gulf of Oman, a carrier air wing farther south, able to reach coastal launch sites if the order ever came. Iran had created pressure, but pressure invites response. And that is where the danger becomes larger than one tanker. My personal view is simple. The most frightening part of this story is not the explosion, it is the business model behind it. A mine does not have to hit. A drone does not have to fire. A missile does not have to launch. If the risk is believable, the market pays attention. And once fear gets priced into every voyage, the strait itself becomes the weapon. What do you think? Would ship owners be right to pay, reroute, or wait for military protection? Drop your opinion in the comments.